Հայ, մի հատ էլ ստեղից փորձենք, երեխեք ջան։ Ինչպես եք գրեք, ինչպես եք։ Hi, Angela ջան. I'm telling you, we tried half an hour ago. It was working perfectly. Now is the fourth attempt, I think.
Okay, finally, that was a
Yes,
crazy technology problem.
yes. I'm sorry for that. Well, I will reintroduce again a little subject for everyone, and then we go on. We're going to do an analysis of the events in Lebanon in terms of analyzing it from the perspective of colored revolutions. We see a certain handwriting from outside. Hi, Yelena Jen. Hi, thanks for joining. It's going to be in English. And I wanted to introduce you to my colleague, a very, very good analyst whose statuses I've been reading for the past week, on sharing his views about the Lebanese protests being based in Beirut currently. And I was asking you about your evaluation of how this event started, what were the triggers, and to which direction it took afterwards.
Okay, so Lebanon has a very problematic constitution and sectarian composition. It makes it very easy for foreign powers to intervene because they can play different parties. Lebanon for the last 10, 15 years has been under a direct threat of colonial control. It lived through the 2006 war, the Israeli war on Lebanon, and Hezbollah, the resistance movement, was able to defeat Israel at the time and survive that. And so since that day, the United States, the empire, and its local tools, Saudi Arabia and Israel, have been trying to bring down the government. Hezbollah has been smart enough to stay out of fully controlling the government because if it does, there will be a civil war, although it could. And managed to find from the Christian population a faction that would support national independence and sovereignty represented in the president's own. But unfortunately, the only party that represents the Sunni population here is led by Hariri. It's called the Future Party. And so he has a monopoly on that. And Hezbollah has no choice but to bring him forward as a prime minister. A year and a half ago, Saudi Arabia kidnapped Hariri and tied him up to a chair and forced him to resign live on television from Riyadh. And at the time, Hezbollah and the president demanded his return safely, and he was able to come back. It took another year after that for finally the government to actually be formed. So you can understand how much pressure Hariri was under to not form that government. And it didn't last, as we saw right now, because it's a national unity government. That it means also all the other parties were involved had their own seats. And, the United States added a lot of sanctions in the last year on banks, making it practically impossible for the Lebanese diaspora to send money back to Lebanon, and Lebanon depends on that money. Around 20% of the economy is from these remittance from Lebanese diaspora. There was banks that were put under sanctions, so they had to shut down. And the ministers that belong to the Lebanese Forces Party, which is this Christian supremacist party that was responsible for a lot of the massacres in Lebanon during the civil war, had control of the important files like economy, labor, education, and so forth. And they triggered, by putting a lot of bad positions, triggered discontent in the country. And that is what led to the uprising that we saw from the population. So the people naturally want better government, they want better services, and now they're being manipulated to bring down the whole government with it.
I wanted to ask you, do the demonstrators realize about that perspective? Because those sanctions on Lebanon and the Lebanese financial system actually caused a budget deficit, which urged the government to increase the taxes. And this is why the demonstrators justify their tireless staying on the streets. And this is why I'm observing also both the Western media and the Middle Eastern media. And I see how they are keen on naming it the WhatsApp taxation demonstrate, the WhatsApp revolution, because the taxes for WhatsApp calls were also increased. But I want to know whether the demonstrators realize what is the core source of these financial economic hardships. Because if they are addressing through their protests the wrong source, there might be no solution whatsoever, and the collapse would follow, and the crisis would be even bigger than before.
Yes, I mean, Lebanon is saturated with media. There's at least 6 different local TV stations. It's a very small population of 4 million, and all of them are connected to different political parties. Although the demands of non-sectarian government, end of corruption, return of stolen money are very general demands that are normal and should be actually supported, the end result is that the media that is pro-imperialist, the majority of the media here, manipulated this into becoming an attack on Hezbollah, on the resistance. Once that happened, a lot of people pulled out of the street, and although it may look like from the outside that the demonstrators are still out in the street, that is not true. Maybe at least 80% of people, once things started becoming clear, withdrew from the streets. Now, because of the Hariri resignation, the militias are back in the street, representing Hariri's party, the Future Party, and the Lebanese Forces Party. They've started, put blockades on the highways to the south, whereas the Hezbollah strongholds, and put blockades on the highways to Syria. So they're kind of strangling the economy of Lebanon, even though the demonstrators are mostly out of the streets, and they are threatening the security and of Hezbollah in this. People are being stopped on these checkpoints, being asked for their IDs, and people that lived the civil war here in Lebanon. Remember, if you're asked for your ID, it means you're being asked about what your sect is, and that is a very deep wound.
But the Hariri resignation also outlines that he would head the temporary government, or this. He would try to arrange things in cooperation with Hezbollah. He himself doesn't have another choice but to cooperate with Hezbollah. Whereas his force is doing the contrary action on the streets. Is this what we are getting now? And how, because I read that their fraction, the demonstrators, are also being supported, not only financed, but coordinated by the Saudis. And I read a report that there was an Emirati citizen, perhaps an employee of the embassy, that was providing some services in the organizational unit of the demonstrators. I want to know these foreign elements that do not allow the local political forces to get united and actually put a solution on the table.
Yeah, I mean, there's a scary situation happening in the north of Lebanon. In the second biggest city is Tripoli, Tarablos. Um, and, the people that are leading the square there are the same actors that we saw getting people to go down to Syria to join the rebellion there. So you see the same faces of the Muslim Brotherhood and the Wahhabi leadership on the stages in Tripoli. And that's, last night the square there was pledging allegiance to Hariri, and, so things are getting more clear right now about who's behind this and what are the who's pulling the strings, and the people being emotional and wanting change are easy to manipulate right now.
It's very similar to Armenia on the emotional side. I want I would like you to represent more in detail Hezbollah's ability to actually push back these demonstrators, and because Hezbollah is much stronger than the opposition that we had in Armenia. It's not the case in Artsakh. In Artsakh, it's still pretty much a similar situation. Artsakh is Karabakh. We call, in Armenia, we call Karabakh Artsakh. But it's very similar. Why I'm drawing this line is because this, after the Bolton appointment, the US took the policy of making all the countries that could serve as a starting point for its actions, military operations against Iran, to try to create internal disturbances and chaos, drawing very vivid division lines, whereby you have pro-Iranian politicians, military and other activists. We have generals, for example, in Armenia's case, to have them removed from the government itself, from any decision-making positions, and instead to have from the other side more pro-Western. And by pro-Western, they don't mean in full integration, for example, with the EU. By pro-Western, in our case, it's the NATO and the US, and automatically Israel as well. By creating this division line and the chaos, they are trying to move closer to the Iranian territory itself, because the talk of war is pretty high, it's pretty real. And Hezbollah seems to be the one strong key that holds all of these front line, be that in Iraq, Syria, or partially in Armenia too, and in Georgia too. It keeps this line intact still. It doesn't allow the West to go beyond it, to get much closer to Israel. And I want to know how Hezbollah actually manages to do that. In what way does it build its infrastructure? And in what way is it able to communicate its political messages today to both the people of Lebanon and the demonstrators and the forces behind them?
So, there was a trap that was set for Hezbollah with the Syrian war. It had to make a choice. If it entered the Syrian war, which it did, that meant that the opponents of it could claim that, look, this is not a resistance movement, this is a movement that is oppressing Sunni Syrians. And Hezbollah made that calculation, and it realized that it's better to be called those names than to allow the Wahhabi Contras to cross into Lebanon, to cut the supply line of weapons to Hezbollah from Syria, and or occupy Lebanon and start a death fields in Beirut and rape factories. And so at the beginning, that may have discredited Hezbollah a little bit, but as soon as the Wahhabi Contras were occupied the Qalamon mountains inside Lebanon from Syria, And the Christian Lebanese realize that, you know, their heads are going to be chopped off if Hezbollah doesn't actually, you know, defeat these Wahhabis. That gained Hezbollah a lot of support. So a lot of the Christians, a lot of the Sunnis, no matter what the people's sect was in Lebanon, in the end, Hezbollah's actions in Syria and its defense of Lebanon from this invasion made it a hero. So what is now being played today, again, is to try to discredit Hezbollah in terms of its support in the populace. So, you know, we saw that Nasrallah came out, you know, spoke 2 times in the last 14 days. And in both cases, Nasrallah said, look, you know, I'm with you for a secular state, against sectarian politics. I'm with you for, you know, rounding up all the corrupt and taking the money back. But what is being asked right now, and chaos, is not going to lead to that. It's actually going to lead to the opposite of that. And so the imperialist media here in Lebanon all turned those words to say, well, Nasrallah is against the demonstrators, when he didn't actually say anything like that. And as we see right now, if you watch the media around the world, it's all claiming that Hezbollah is the one that is against the demonstrators. And with Hariri resigning, Saudi Arabia got what they wanted without him being strapped to a chair. So, you know, this is where the situation is. You know, it's an inspiration, Hezbollah, for all the resistance in the region. We saw resistance that is very similar, rise in Iraq, that is similar to Hezbollah. And now we see how in Iraq also there's a game being played to take down the government that was elected that the US doesn't fully control. So where things are going to go, I'm not sure. I hope for the best.
A lot of the comments that came about the Lebanese demonstrations were that the people are demanding for a new a government with new faces. They also packaged these demands as the first time in Lebanese history where people are demanding a non-sectarian government. They want an overhaul of the entire system. And they demand that new people be appointed. However, they have no leaders. How realistic are these demands? How realistic is their realization without any bloodshed, without the country going into the Syrian or even Libyan scenario?
It is not realistic at all. I mean, in 1975, before the civil war started, the Lebanese people were demonstrating for end of corruption and non-sectarian politics. And, you know, the response to these progressive leftist demonstrations that happened in 75 was the United States and Israel triggering the civil war that lasted for until 1990. So, you know, because leaderless demonstrations may sometimes be at one point a positive thing that could, you know, take down a government or something like this. But at the same time, it's an Achilles heel to have a leaderless movement because that means those who are in power or have power, usually the reactionary forces, the right wing, will take over. And we saw that happening in Lebanon, in Libya, in Egypt, in Syria, and so forth. So it is unrealistic to try to rule a country or get into power in a country that is surrounded by all these enemies, that has been living 100 years of this imperialist war, and expect something like that. And when people speak about what do you call it, the bureaucratic or you know, government that is not politician, What does that mean? They mean that they want to bring IMF, World Bank supported people into power that are anti-resistance, that will do anything that the United States want. And again, that's a trap that Hezbollah is not going to accept.
Well, in Armenia, we actually have such a government now. And in 1 year, it has increased all our external debt. And it's still going to approve of more and more loans from the IMF and the World Bank. And it's pretty much like handing the most precious keys of your country to outsiders who definitely they already dictate their external agenda, and they will dictate even more if they achieve their final goal, which is the removal of the Russian base on the Armenian-Turkish border. And in the Artsakh territories, they want 2 regions that are bordering with Iran. They want to translate our de facto victory. Twice Azerbaijan had attacked us and twice we have won. They want these regions to go under the control of Azerbaijan because Azerbaijan is in close cooperation with Turkey and Israel, and directly in that manner also with Saudi Arabia. And those regions bordering with Iran would then be under their operational command. And the US could maneuver any way it likes, whereas while it's Armenia and Russian military cooperation agreement in place, and in practice, it is our biggest security guarantee, then they will have all of this fiasco that they're having in Lebanon. But in Lebanon, basically Hezbollah is fulfilling similar function to the Russian base, and they're unable to pass through it. But they do try different, in Russian current political science, the analysts usually refer to it as hybrid wars, because by its essence, it's exactly a war. By its economic effects, by its effects on the social status of the people, the ongoing immigration, people leaving their countries because there is no security of the future of tomorrow's day. No one knows how they will live tomorrow. And not many people can handle such a pressure. They start leaving. Plus, we also have what you call imperialistic media. We had this media entering Armenia for the past 15 years, financed by different foreign embassy, the foreign governments, the governments of other countries in their foreign ministries, they have the so-called economic development programs, whatever. They've been actively financing TV channels that have been drawing very bad images of anyone who might not allow these plans to happen. So that's the information war aspect, plus the economic war aspect. And in Hezbollah's case, it has been also the cyber war aspect, because I do remember that the US government, for the past 6 months or so, they have been giving an announcement that they will award any hacker about $10 million if they provide the US with information on bank transactions between Hezbollah and the Revolutionary Guards of Iran. These are all tactics that are very, very much in style of Wild Wild West, because in terms of the UN Security Council resolutions and standards of behavior, it goes nowhere in. And Iran is trying to balance a very delicate diplomatic line, whereby it tries to cooperate both with Armenia and via Armenia with the other Eurasian countries. I'm speaking about the Eurasian Economic Union. In October, Rouhani was visiting Armenia. October 27, Iran signed an agreement of membership with the Eurasian Union as a means of trying to open economic markets where the transactions don't have to be done in dollars. And I want you to address also the issue of the fact that Lebanese economy is 70% dollarized, and therefore it proved to be more vulnerable, whereby Iran and Armenia still aren't. I'm not talking about Iraq and Syria because it's collapsed. If you could address this banking issue in one way or another.
Yes. So you know, you can purchase anything in Lebanon in dollar. And obviously the big businesses, when they're doing their, importing and purchasing, they're doing it in the dollar. And for a long time, the Lebanese lira was, pegged to the dollar at 1,500 liras equals $1. And so with the sanctions that were imposed in the last 6 months, 9 months, and the closing of the banks, and because the governor of the National Bank of Lebanon has been appointed by the Americans since 1990, he hasn't been changed, and no government has the courage to take him out. He has been squeezing the dollar out of the market. So in the last 2 months, the Lebanese lira had crashed. Today it's being exchanged at 1850 instead of 1500. So that means most people lost a third of their wealth. And the businesses who had already purchased all this product in dollar are now having to sell it in lira, but now they've lost a third of their, again, of the costs that they, of the products that they bought. And, this is part of why just before this demonstration started, before the new budget was brought in, the gas stations went on a strike for 3-4 days because they're selling the customer in the Lebanese lira, but they've bought their gas, their diesel and gasoline with the dollar, and they were losing money. So they went on a strike. Similar thing happened in the bakeries. They're buying the wheat. Purposeful things that were done to trigger these demonstrations that we saw. And so the Lebanese economy is very fragile because of its dependency on the dollar, because of its dependency on remittance from diaspora Lebanese, and because the war on Syria meant Lebanese exports have been have crashed. Lebanon as an agricultural economy couldn't sell its products to the Gulf anymore, or it had to ship them through boats instead of trucks, which brought up their prices, which meant other competitors were able to sell at a cheaper price. So all of these things are connected. The target is Iran, obviously, in the end, and Palestine, making sure Hezbollah can't defend Palestine. But, the US, the empire, cannot attack Iran before it takes out all its allies. And that includes Syria, that includes Iraq, that includes Hezbollah and Lebanon, that includes Yemen, the Houthis, and that includes Armenia, that includes, it's been 10 years that the US wants to start a war with Iran, but it knows it can't start it without taking out the others, the smaller players that could, support Iran in a war and have a regional war that the US cannot actually win. So now we see Syria's coming out of the war. It's almost winning everything. So they started now with Lebanon again.
In Syria, we have a situation where Americans use the excuse of the oil fields to be protected from the ISIS brigades to march back with 500 soldiers strong army units with tanks. And to this respect, the Russian Defense Ministry has been unusually outspoken by publishing satellite images on how during all these years, the US Army operatives have been providing all the specialized trucks and relevant equipment to sell oil out of this region. And in the northeast of Syria, it's Syrian oil resources 90% and half of the gas resources. And they use the oil being safe to remain there. And Trump is even using the very unusual. He says that he wants ExxonMobil to have a contract with the Syrian oil, but it's unclear with which government, because to do that he has to obviously have a memorandum of understanding, at least with the Syrian government. But both the Trump administration and NATO, they insist that they're going to continue their policies in the region with the agenda of having Bashar Assad removed from his position. So I don't see any agreement coming around with these oil resources. At the same time, the US is leading another bargain with Turkey, and Turkey leads another separate bargain with Russia. I think it's, I'm not sure if Syrian war front is being entirely seal closed, but obviously, yes, you're right that the Syrian, Iranian and Russian units are doing an excellent job at removing both ISIS and foreign operatives that do not have the right to be there. But for the Americans to remain and manage those oil resources, they can only be able to do that if they somehow go back to having the cooperation with the Kurds in exchange for promises of autonomy, and having joint agreements with Turkey and the US, between Turkey and the US. And Turkey currently in its units conducting certain operations in northeast Syria, even within the framework of with the agreement with Russians. They have units of Muslim Brotherhood instilled with the Turkish army units and marching, and they don't hide that they belong to Muslim Brotherhood, and they do not also hide that their agenda is to remove Bashar Assad. So in this perspective, their agenda matches with the statements that we hear from NATO. I'm trying to communicate that I'm not so optimistic about the Syrian war front. They're going to try and prolong it because these oil resources are very important if the US will start military operations in Iran. He needs this corridor, and they need these resources and the revenues coming from the realization of these resources in the market. And Israel, by all means, helps in this process. It's quite hard in that region to speak about agreements because none of the parties can actually stay loyal to that. They all play their interest games, and that makes Lebanon's position even more vulnerable. I want to ask you on how likely is it that Israel will engage in some form of military actions or conduct some operations on the Lebanese territory, given the current situation with the demonstrations? How likely is it?
Well, just this afternoon, there was an Israeli drone that flew over South Lebanon, and Hezbollah fired a anti-air defense missile and shot down that drone. So the hot war that Israel wants against Hezbollah is possible at any moment. But at the same time, just a month ago, 2 months ago, Hezbollah had a very beautiful operation in the south where they, took out an Israeli APC and injured the Israeli soldiers in it. And the response of the Israeli army was withdrawing from the occupied border, of Palestine to 12 kilometers inwards, and journalists from Lebanon just crossed the border and started walking into the Israeli bases that were empty. So, Israel can wish for whatever it wants. but it really can't deliver anymore what it wants. And this is why it has to depend on direct American involvement in Syria. At the same time, I can say that if Israel attacks Lebanon, that would be the best thing that Hezbollah can wish for, because it can now end that, excuse my language, the bullshit discussion that is happening in the streets. Today there was somebody that was trying to burn an Israeli flag, and this is live on television, and another demonstrator grabbed the Israeli flag and hugged it and said, please, you can't burn it, we don't hate anybody. And so to see that this level of this discussion is reaching live mainstream media in Lebanon, there is nothing better than a war that Israel can do, and it will be defeated in it, that's for sure. What is scary here now in Lebanon is the fact that the imperialist tools are trying to push towards a civil war. And, again, probably Hezbollah will win that, but it will be at a huge cost for the country. There'll be, hundreds of thousands of dead and another scar on this nation. So I don't wish that. I hope that Hezbollah will be able to maneuver around this and find a way to create a new government and without having a civil war.
Oh, I truly wish. I also read in one of your comments, you had written on how you would prefer the demonstrators act, to whom you would prefer that they present their actual demands. You had written, I think, about foreign embassies and representations of international financial institutions. But the demonstrators aren't aware of that. There is no movement leading the demonstrators that could actually take your words into action. And how would you see a new government be formed from what kind of people? If they don't have leaders now, do you see any possibility that there could be a government that indeed doesn't have anyone from the previous teams?
I don't see any possibility of that. I mean, there is a constitution, there is a parliament that's elected. Hariri right now is still the prime minister, but he's governing with whatever he wants, in a way. He's in a caretaker government. How he will be able to find a compromise with Hezbollah, that's a big question. And if people really want a secular state with a secular election, that requires that the parliament passes this new law. So things can't just come out of thin air, and the parliament is divided. Hezbollah has majority with its coalition in the parliament, but if it tries to do that, then again they will say Hezbollah is being dictatorial. So it's a very delicate political game right now, and I don't know how Hezbollah can present solutions that are not going to be turned around and claim to be the opposite of these solutions. In terms of the demonstrators, there was one very beautiful demonstration that was lasted for a while in front of the central bank that is ruled by this man since 1990 and is responsible for all the theft of money and in the country. And what we saw is that the mainstream media purposefully refused to cover it in Lebanon, because that was the actual most serious demonstration. Everything else was, parties or dances and or blockades on roads, cutting people's livelihood and their ability to move in the country. So the only serious demonstration was that in front of the central bank. And Hezbollah, I think, was supporting that demonstration. Maybe not openly, but under the table. And I saw like there Hezbollah's media covering it extensively. But now those demonstrations are gone. Things are getting more on the blockades, and confrontations are starting to happen. If you look at Iraq, it's the same problem. People are demonstrating against corruption and against sectarianism, but the United States is stealing all the oil. The U.S. is the one that put in the sectarian constitution. So it's logical for people in Iraq demonstrating to go and expel the American soldiers, go to their bases, and or go to the oil fields and liberate them and nationalize that oil. But demonstrators are being manipulated and made to attack the Iranian consulate in the south of Iraq, or the popular mobilization forces, the ones that fought ISIS. Yeah.
I would also like you to comment on the Kurdish factor after the Turkish invasion. How do you see both their alliance with the US prior to this invasion, and what perspectives do they have now with the Syrian government? How realistic those are? Because Turkey aims not only to the Kurdish areas in Syria, it actually has a bigger appetite that includes the Kurdistan in Iraq. This is their aim. Because today we discussed a little bit, I would like to know your opinion.
Yeah, I mean, the Kurdish militias, or Contras, are playing with the lives of the Kurdish population. They had originally, when ISIS started invading Syria, and from the Syrian army had to withdraw from the the extremities of the country and the sparsely populated areas towards the spine of the country, that from Aleppo to Damascus, where the majority of the population is, and so when the Syrian army was withdrawing, the only people that were ready to defend the area were the Kurdish militias, and the Syrian army opened its depots and gave them the weapons to fight ISIS as it withdrew towards the cities, Qamishli, Hasaka, and Deir ez-Zor, and so forth. Unfortunately, after that happened, you saw the YPG turning around and joining the United States. And we saw also in Afrin when the Turkish army was invading with the Wahhabi Contras, and the Syrian army asked them, "Hey, let us in so we can defend against the Turks." They refused, and they lost Afrin. This was, on the west of Aleppo. And now again, it took a really long time to get the Kurdish militias to agree to the Syrian army coming back to the north to defend it from the Turkish invasion. And up until today, I'm watching the news, what's happening there. They still haven't withdrawn according to the agreement, and so they're playing a game. They're going with the Americans to occupy the oil fields. They're refusing to let the Syrian army fully to the front. They're refusing to fully withdraw. So they are, in a way, giving a chance to the empire and to Turkey, which is part of the empire, to do as they wish with the Syrian lands. And historically, unfortunately, the Kurdish people have been cursed with these leaderships that work with the empire against the good of their own people.
And the last, I would like to ask, from my perspective, if you want to raise another subject, we will. In view of the US increasing its military personnel, its Air Force military personnel with specialized assistance in Saudi Arabia, because it is a huge cost to be transferring all of these units, transferring it from the Qatari base. After the Iranian attack or the pro-Iranian forces attack on the Saudi oil facilities. The US is moving its F-22s, it's bringing B-1 bombers, it's adding 3,000 additional military personnel. Do you think this will actually be put in use any near future against Iran?
You know, I don't think the United States is capable of attacking Iran without dealing with all the axis of resistance before, all the other parts of the axis of resistance. And so if they attack Iran right now, Israel will be leveled to the ground. If they attack Iran right now, all the oil fields of the Gulf vessel states will be burning. If they attack Iran right now, both the Hormuz state and Bab el-Mandeb across from Yemen will be shut down. World economy, you know, this is where like almost, you know, half of all the shipping in the world has to pass through these straits. So the world economy will collapse. So the ego of the empire, you know, is maybe running a little bit too far from the reality on the ground, but also, you know, the empire is collapsing as we see it, and it's collapsing very fast, and maybe that is causing some people within the empire to think that they need to do bold things to stop this collapse from going as fast as it's going. And that's where danger comes. You know, if somebody within the American establishment decides that it's better to go to war right now than to agree to a new arrangement in world politics. And luckily Russia and China are pushing for a new arrangement in world politics that can respond to the end of the old order that came after World War II. Okay,
good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If you want to add anything, let me know. If not,
well, I just want to say that Armenia is in the heart of all Syrians. You know, the relationship between Armenia and Syria is historic, thousands of years, you know, language, culture, and religion. And the future of Armenia is very dependent on the future of Syria, and Syria's future is very dependent on Armenia's future. So the resistance to imperialist positions in Armenia is really strengthens us as Syrians and as Arabs here in the region. So, you know, power to the people.
Yeah, I agree. Great. Thank you very much. And I wish you a good evening. Thank you.
Have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Շնորհակալ եմ, որ լսեցիք։ Մեկը գրել էր, որ թարգման բերեմ, լայթին հրավիրեմ, որպեսզի դուք լսեք իսկապես միջին արևելքում եւ արևմուտքում բնակվող, ինքը եւ կանադացի է, եւ լիբանանցի, եւ ծագումով սիրիացի։ Ես ուզում եմ, որ դուք լսեք բուն ռեգիոնի մասնագետների կարծիքը, իրենց նկարագրությունը եւ հասկանաք, որ միայն ես չեմ, որ այսպես եմ խոսում, ես ամենևին հետազոտությունները, որ իրականացնում եմ, չեմ կատարում դրանք միակողմանիորեն, որովհետեւ
Շատ հաճախ Թավշյա Երևանից, Երևանի Թավշյա հատվածից այսպիսի մեկնաբանություններ են հասնում ինձ, ըստ որի ներկայացնում են իբրև թե ես ինչ-որ օրակարգ ունեմ, կամ ինչ-որ չգիտեմ, որ երկրի ես իմ ինչպիսի ծառայության աշխատող եմ, կամ այս ամեն ինչը ես ասում եմ, որպեսի իրանց Թավիշի դեմ ինչ-որ տենց դիսկրեդիտացիա կատարվի ու չգիտեմ ինչ, ոչ, ես ուզում եմ, որ դուք լսեիք, թե ինչպես են փորձագետները, ինչպես են այդ պատերազմի թողոբոհում ապրող աշխատող մարդիկ նկարագրում իրավիճակը, նկարագրում թե գեոքաղաքական ասպեկտներով, թե իրենց բուն երկրի քաղաքական տնտեսական զարգացման տեսանկյունից եւ թե իրենց հայրենակիցների արդար պահանջների տեսանկյունից։ Այսինքն կան օբյեկտիվ փաստեր, որոնք չի կարելի անտեսել, երբ որ դու ունես նման այսպիսի գեոքաղաքական իրողություն, դու ունես նման ռեալպոլիտիկի խաղ քո անմիջական շրջապատում, իսկ մեր անմիջական շրջապատը դա հենց մեծ միջին արևելքի տարածաշրջանն է, նախքան նույնիսկ Ռուսաստան կամ Եվրոմիություն լինելը, մենք ենք այդ շրջանի մեջ ներգրավված եւ մեզնից անկախ մենք ինչպիսի այսպես ներքին ինչ-որ մեկնաբանություններ եւ արդարացումներ էլ առաջ բերենք մեր Թավիշի մասին, այդ Թավիշը վաղուց հայտնվել է մեր երկրում, ունենալով տարածաշրջանային տեսանկյունից իր օբյեկտիվ փաստարկները, իր raison d'être, ինչի համար է ինքը ծնվել, ինքը ինչպես է իրագործվում մեր հասարակության մեջ եւ դեպի ուր է տանում։ Եվ ուրեմն մենք իր հետ զրուցեցինք այս 3 հարթություններով՝ միջազգային գեոքաղաքականություն, տարածաշրջանային իրողություն, որը ստեղծվում է միջազգային լուրջ գեոքաղաքական խաղացողների մանիպուլյացիաներով, եւ խոսեցինք բուն երկրի ներսում արդեն այս մաքսիմալ ճնշումից ստեղծված խորը սոցիալ-տնտեսական ճգնաժամի վերաբերյալ։ Եվ ինքը ամբողջովին կիսելով իր հայրենակիցների ցավը, ամբողջովին հասկանալով, որ այո, իրենք պետք է սոցիալական արդարության, տնտեսական հավասարության, քաղաքական հարաբերությունների այլ համակարգ պահանջեն, սակայն ինքը հարցականի տակ է դնում, թե ով է այս խնդիրների, այս պահանջների իրական հասցեատերը։ Արդյոք այն հասցեատերը, ում իրենք դիմում են, ընդունակ է այդ խնդիրները լուծելու այնպես, ինչպես իրենք են պահանջում որպես քաղաքացիներ, որովհետև եթե դու ունես այնպիսի իշխանություն, որը օտար օրակարգի կողմից է ծնված, ուղղակիորեն կամ անուղղակիորեն դա կարող է լինել։ Այսինքն սա 60-ականները չեն, 50-ական, 70-ականները չեն, որտեղ մենք ունենք այսպես Լատինական Ամերիկայի պատմությունը, եթե ուսումնասիրեք կտեսնեք, ուղղակի միջամտություն, ուղղակի ամերիկյան գործիչների կողմից, ամերիկյան հատուկ ծառայությունների ուղղակի ներազդեցություն, մենք հիմա ունենք ավելի այսպես նյուանսներով լի, ավելի սողուն, ավելի հանդուգն եւ միևնույն ժամանակ ավելի երկարաժամկետ ստրատեգիական առումով կազմավորված մանիպուլատիվ ծրագրեր։ Դրա համար Սորոսի կազմակերպությունները 15 տարի գոյություն են ունեցել Հայաստանում, այնպես ինչպես կան։ Դրա համար օտար երկրների արտգործ նախարարությունների տարբեր զարգացման ծրագրեր ֆինանսավորել են տարբեր մամլոմիջոցներ, որոնք արել են անպատասխանատու հայտարարություններ, եւ վերջում մենք այսօր գտնվում ենք այս հիբրիդային պատերազմի թովուբոհում։ Եվ տեսնում ենք, որ իրապես, ինչպես որ իմ գոլեգան այստեղ նշեց, իրապես գնում է սահմանազատում այն ուժերի միջև, որոնք ամբողջովին այդ երկրի կուրսը քաղաքական կփոխեն դեպի արևմուտք, իրենց կամքով թե առանց իրենց կամքի, եւ այն ուժերի, ովքեր իրապես իրենց քաղաքական, ռազմական, մշակութային ասպեկտներով կայացած լինելով, չեն ընդունի դրսից, վերևից որևէ թելադրանք։ Այս նույն սահմանագիծը հիմա գծվում է Լիբանանում, փորձելով սևացնել Հեզբոլային, ինչպես մեր մոտ փորձում են սևացնել մեր Արցախյան ազատամարտի հետ առնչություն ունեցող հերոսներին եւ մեծ գործիչներին, նույնը կատարվում է Իրաքում, նույնը կատարվում է Սիրիայում, որտեղ պատերազմի բեմը անդադ փակում են, սակայն չի փակվում։ Եվ նույնը հիմա շարունակում են իրականացնել ամբողջ տարածաշրջանում, ով որ իրանց հետ համաձայն չի։ Նույնիսկ Թուրքիայում դա կարող է գործարկվի։ Այնպես որ Այսպիսին էր իր գնահատականը Լիբանանի մասին։ Ես ուզում եմ դուք հասկանաք, որ եթե Հզբոլան անկում ապրեց, եթե այդ PMU, այն նման հավասարազոր ուժերը Իրաքում անկում ապրեցին, ապա պատերազմը կմոտենա Իրանին եւ կմոտենա մեզ։ Եվ իմ հյուրը վերջում իր խոսքը փակեց նրանով, որ Հայաստանը միջին արևելքի տեսանկյունից, Սիրիայի, Լիբանանի տարբեր ուժերի, Իրաքի տարբեր ուժերի տեսանկյունից դիտվում է որպես իրենց թիկունքը պահպանող կարևորագույն օղակներից մեկը։ Այսինքն այն կապը, որտեղ արդեն սկսվում է, այնտեղից սկսվում է իրենց համար Ռուսաստանի գծած անվտանգության գոտին։ Այնպես որ Ռուսաստանը Հայաստանի եւ Թուրքիայի սահմանի վրա գտնվելով հանդերձ, նաեւ պաշտպանում է այս բոլոր երկրները։ Այսքանը այս հարցազրույցի մասին շատ չերկարացնեմ, որ անգլերենով կարողանանք տարածել եւ ավելի շատ մարդիկ լսեն, եւ սա իմ այսպես more or less այսպես թարգմանություն էր, թե մենք ինչի մասին զրուցեցինք։ Շնորհակալ եմ, որ միացաք, մինչ հաջորդ եթեր եւ հանդիպում։ Բարի երեկո, բարի գիշեր։